good for looking after 300 sheep and packing their backsides. That's all. He didn't realize his potential. How big is your potential? The largeness of your potential is the size of your God. If you worship a small God, you will have a small potential. If you worship a big God, you will have a big potential. The potential is limited by the size of the God you worship. If you don't believe God is big, God is great, God is mighty, God is God, you will be limited in your potential. You know, in my life, I've seen people who have overcome huge handicaps in their life, and some of them don't even know Jesus. We know Jesus. Just think how much more can we overcome even greater handicaps. For example, some of the famous film stars. Do you know Bruce Willis, the film star? He had a stammer. And those of you who are older, have you heard of a famous diva called Marilyn Monroe? She had a stammer, and yet they overcame these stammers and established for themselves. In my medical cohort, in medical school, there was one of the medical students in the same year with me who had a stammer. And he had very, very, very difficult to speak. It's like, I'm not making fun of anybody with stammers here. You may have children with stammers. Now God loves them and God will enable them to overcome. So let me just dramatize the stammer so that you just understood what the student was going through. He was in a medical school with me now. He was bright enough to get into medical school, but he had this speech defect. And if you have a speech defect and you're trying to do medicine, it's really tough, right? It's very, very tough. Because all the time you have to present your cases, your patients before the professors on the ward round. You have to speak fast because everybody wants to move fast, and the professors will come together with a team of specialists, with all the junior doctors and all the other doctors and medical students and all the nurses and all the ward sisters, and you have to speak and present your case to the patient, to the professor and the consultants on the ward round, and you have to speak fast. So when you have a patient that is sick, you have to say, this is Mrs. Smith, she's 45 years old, she came in with chest pains, and she was sweaty, and I made the diagnosis of a heart attack, and this is how I'm going to treat Mrs. Smith. But supposing you have a stammer, this is Mrs. Smith, she's 45 years old, she can't. Oh, it's really tough. But this student in my cohort, he overcame this by actually devising a method. He knew that his defect, his speech defect, had something to do with the rhythm of his breathing. So he would beat out the rhythm of his breathing on his lap. And as he beat this out, the rhythm of his breathing on his lap, he would speak. He would say, this is Mrs. Smith, and she is 45 years old. She came in with chest pains and sweating, and I made the diagnosis of a heart attack, and this is my treatment for her. It was incredible. Not all of us, we didn't listen to a word he was saying. We only watched his hand hitting the tire all the time. And as he did that, it was an astounding thing that he did. He overcame all his setbacks in becoming huge in his potential. Now there was a man who is called Nick Vujicic. Have you heard of Nick Vujicic? Have anyone seen or heard of Nick Vujicic? Nick Vujicic was born without arms and legs. He's got a condition called tetraplegia, without arms and legs. And can you imagine, his parents put him into a normal school as a little boy. He was teased to no end at school. And as a young teenager, he tried to commit suicide twice. He couldn't understand why God had birthed him without arms and legs. He had no arms, no hands. He had no legs except a little kind of club, little one toe, big toe sticking out. And he couldn't understand. He was teased to no end at school. Why did you do this to me, God? His father was a preacher. His mother was a very godly woman. They said to him, Nick, you can complain about what you don't have and live a life of but suppose you only this and not happen. Or you can live and you can be thankful for what you have and say, but God. So one day, Nick was reading John chapter 9. And in John chapter 9, the disciples of Jesus came up to Jesus and said to him, why was this man born blind? Just like Nick Vujicic, he was born without limbs. Why was this man born blind? Was it because of his sin or the sin of his fathers? And Jesus said, it was none of that. It was because so that the glory of God may be revealed in his life. And when Nick Wojcik read that, he realized, that's why was I born without limbs? So that the glory of God may be revealed in my life. Then his mindset switched from but suppose to but God. And he began to live for God. He finished his degree, and did a master's degree, finished that, and then he began to speak to the world. He got to speak to students in school, speak to teenagers, speak to young people. Today, Nick Wojcik has spoken to more than 300 million people across the world. He is a global sensation. And I brought has he ever come to Sri Lanka? Has he? Well, I think one day he will come. I brought my daughter, who was then 14 years old, to see Nick Wojcik. On a table, on a platform like that. He's walking up and down on the table, because it's only that high, only about that high. He's walking on the table, and he's speaking. And so inspirational. And I said to my daughter, Sarah, you watch Nick Wojcik. If this man can do what he does without arms and legs, with God's help, there is nothing you cannot do. I said to them, now Nick Wojcik is incredible. He's written books, unstoppable, limitless. Nick Wojcik, without arms and legs, plays football. How do you do it? You just watch. He plays golf. He surfs. He skydives. He dives. He swims. He does most things more than what people who got limbs can do. And then 2 years ago, he got married. Amazing. And then a year after he got married to a beautiful girl. And then a year after he got married, he had a baby. And can't you imagine? He cannot hold his baby because he's got no arms. Can you imagine what he does? He puts a sling around his shoulders. And the baby is there close to him. And he walks around with the baby like this. That's an amazing thing. Why was he able to do all this? He didn't live a life of but suppose. He lived a life of but God. Somebody say but God. He could have lived a life of but suppose. But suppose this happened. No, but God. And I want to say this to you. What lies within you is far greater than what lies ahead of you and what is laid behind you. And because but suppose will always cap our potential. And thirdly, but suppose will kill our faith. But suppose will always kill our faith. What is the greatest opposite of faith? It is fears in our lives. Fear that we will die young. Fear that we will get cancer. Fear that the family will be destroyed. Fear we won't have enough. Fear that somehow all these challenges will break the family up. Fear that we can't get through it. Fear will kill our faith. Because it is born out of, but suppose the bad things continue to happen. But suppose God doesn't come through for us. But suppose if only the bad things that happened in the past, it will kill our journey. Now I don't know what about you. It will kill your faith. Some of you've had breakup in your relationships. You've had broken marriages. You've had painful betrayals. You've made financial losses and bad decisions. You've gone into a life of addiction, maybe to alcohol or to drugs or to cyber gaming, and it's destroyed your life. And now you're being restored and you believe God cannot use you. And you feel that, you cannot even be used by God. Don't listen to the devil's lies. Because you will live a life of what suppose. But you say, yes, all this has happened to my life. Yes, there were bad things. Yes, there were losses in my family. I'm not going to live on but suppose. I'm not going to look back and regret and say, but suppose. I will say, but God, you come into my family. And then I will live a life of fear. There are many kinds of fears. There are over 200, maybe now 300 medical fears that have been labeled fears, for which people go to a psychiatrist and pay a psychiatrist to get these fears removed from their lives. There's a fear of heights, acrophobia. The fear of closed spaces, claustrophobia. Fear of open spaces, agoraphobia. There's all kinds of phobias. Even, for example, a fear of spiders, arachnophobia. Fear of snakes, herpetophobia. There's even a fear of money. There are people who fear money. They see a Sri Lankan rupee note, they're afraid. It's called chromatophobia. Anyone of you got fear of money? Please put up your hands. I can help you very much. I can help you get rid of that fear. There's even a fear of going to church. It's called ecclesiophobia. Yeah, turn to your neighbor and say, you don't have that fear. Hallelujah. You don't have that fear. And some people, there's even a fear of wives. They're afraid of their wives. But that hasn't been named as a medical condition yet, okay? So all kinds of fears, all our lives. You know, when I married Nancy 32 years ago, one of the things I like to do is I like to climb mountains. God can deliver us from our fears. So, in the first year of our marriage, at the end of the first year, I said to Nancy, why don't we were in England then, we were in Britain, and I said, why don't we climb the highest mountain in Britain? The highest mountain in Britain is Ben Nevis in Scotland, just over 4,000 feet high, not very high. So we climbed up, we went up. Now as you climb the mountain, you don't know you're climbing higher and higher because you're just looking at the step that's ahead of you. When she got to the top of Ben Nevis, she turned around, and on the peak, she saw, you know, the vast countryside below her, all people down there, cars on their little dots. She saw the sea in the distance, and she realized how high up she was for the first time. And I said to her at that time, I said, it's time to go down now. She said, no, I cannot. I've got a fear of heights. I said, how come you didn't tell me that? She said, I know, you didn't ask me, so I have a fear of heights. I said, but we got to get down. She said, no, I cannot go down. It's too high. And so I said, I'm dead. We cannot go down. And I think you're a bit too heavy for me to carry you down, you know. So what are we going to do? So she said, it's only one way. I can only slide down on my backside. So she sat on the ground and she started sliding down the slopes on her backside. It took us longer going down the mountain than climbing up the mountain. So by the time we reached the foot of the mountain, it was already 9 o'clock at night, dark. Nancy had a fear of heights. She had a phobia, you know. And when we then came back to Malaysia, a few years later, we live now in East Malaysia. I was working in East Malaysia, and we were there, we settled. And in East Malaysia is the highest mountain in Southeast Asia. 13,500 feet. 3 times the height of Nevis in Scotland. And I climbed there because I love climbing mountains. You climb on a wall, pure rock face up there, you know, with some ropes, and we climbed. I climbed there a few times. And I said, there's no way Nancy can climb this mountain. She had fear of heights, would kill her. No way. So I never even suggested to her climbing the mountain. And one day we were at a church meeting like this, just like this. And a man of God came by. And he said, there are people here with fears. There are people here. Fears of cockroaches. Fear of snakes. Fear of spiders. Fear of height. I turned to Nancy, I said, you got all 4. So why did you just, I think God is speaking to you, why did you come up for? You know, he said, I want you all to come up. So many people came up, but Nancy, she said, yeah, I think I'm going to go up too. So she came up. And the man of God laid hands on her, prayed for her. She fell under the power of the Spirit. She came back to the chair we were sitting. I said, what's happened? She said, I feel something's gone. So I said, what? I think it's the heights. I said, well, in that case, let's test it. So, you know, there was a hill about 800 feet high near our house. And I brought her climbing up the hill, so it's not a problem. But when we reached the top of the hill, we would turn around, and it's a very steep hill. She would see the city before her. And the sea in the distance. So, at that 800 feet. So, I got her to the top, and I said, now you turn around, look. I said, how is it? She said, it's okay. I said, you have any fear? She said, no. I said, can you walk down? I expected her to sit down on the backside. No, she walked down. I said, can you run down, jog down a bit? So she started jogging down. God had delivered her from the fear of heights. She was totally delivered from the fear of heights. Hallelujah! So I said, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. If truly God has delivered you, let's climb Mount Kinabalu together. The highest mountain in Southeast Asia. 13,500 feet. Will you come with me? She said, of course. So, on our 11th wedding anniversary, you see what present I gave her for 11th wedding anniversary? Climbing mountain. She climbed the mountain with me on our 11th wedding anniversary, and on that day, on the anniversary day itself, we stood at the top of the mountain. She climbed it. And Mount Kinabalu, 13,500 feet, is very high. And when you stand on the summit, you stand on the summit here, okay, behind you is a cliff that goes right down 5,000 feet. 5,000 feet drop. Boom, down. You stand on the summit. So I said, how is it? She said, I don't like it, but it's fine. God had enabled her to conquer her fear. Now, this is, she could have lived a life of sin. But suppose, last time I climbed the mountain, you know, it took me so long to come down. But suppose, it was not, God never delivered me. But suppose, when that person, the man of God laid hands on me, it was just a feeling, emotional feeling. No. Instead of saying, "Not supposed," she said, "But God." And as a result of that, her life began to change. And God began to take over the fears of her life. And she began to live for God. And I just want to say that these are the three things that "But suppose" will do to our lives. It will paralyze us spiritually. It will cap our potential.